Susanna. Hi.
Hi, I liked that song.
I think of the song like Susanna, Bobana, ooh, Susanna.
I
It's so lame to do that
haven't
as
heard that
kids.
one. What is that from? Do you remember?
I think it's just like a thing that they sing to kids, right? Like, or a
Yeah.
camp song or something like that.
I always got the like, oh, Susanna, like banjo on my knee or whatever. Oh,
Oh,
Susanna,
oh,
don't you?
Susanna with the, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I always
Yeah.
get Maria, like from uh song.
Santana,
No, not the Santana one, although that sometimes comes. That one's way
more recent
cool.
reference.
Yeah. No, from wow, I actually don't remember the name of the movie, which is really sad because I've heard it a million times, but I'm a little slow today. So that makes sense. I can't believe it's our second last episode of the
I
series.
know. I know. Yeah. I'm kind of in denial about it. I don't want it to be over.
Yeah, and we're talking about vulnerability and so, okay, so has it been a vulnerable time for you? Because it really has been for me.
You
Yes,
know
it
what? I
has.
feel like I came out of like a very vulnerable moment and I'm like just coming out, dare I say, and then I feel like you just entered one. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to like bounce off of each other's experiences, but like as you know, and like in the previous episode I talked about it a bunch, but like I had like my sty in my eye. Just constantly gets me how that rhymes. Um, so I was like in glasses that are too weak for my vision, like for 2 weeks. It's been like, I'm into like my third week of not really wearing makeup's like not a big deal, but I just feel like I'm only starting to get back to myself. So it's been like a 3 week, I would say, kind of like situation. And so much came up around that time about my appearance, being like embarrassed of the sty, even after it was healing. Like I just have this like, I had this like big crusty thing like on my eyelid that
Mm.
was like drying out and falling falling off. Sorry to gross anybody out. Um, and I was like kind of ashamed to like show it and like hiding it when I posted to Instagram and still tried to despite that. Um, and then had a lot of emotional stuff come up around just like my vision growing up as a child, how it's not something I have to face every day, but there's definitely a feeling of
Like your
just
eyesight.
yeah, my eyesight, like just feeling less safe, when I can't see as clearly, obviously.
Mm.
Even if I'm in my home and like I know it's not like it's so bad that I can't see the layout of things, but like I just have to kind of rely on muscle memory in certain ways. And,
Yeah.
and like going outside was scary because I'd be like just uncomfortable. Like I mistake like a recycling bin for a person from far
Mm-hmm.
away,
Yeah.
or just the fear that I might see somebody that I know and not recognize them because I can't see them until they're like right in front of me. So there were a lot of things coming up around that. And then yeah, I had a lot of emotional release during that time. Like had sort of just been dipping back into past like relationships and things that I've been through and just reliving some old pains and trying to like let it go. And I tried to do kind of like a final closing, releasing sort of ritual for myself to like invite my new life to finally step into that um
Mm.
at the closure of this whole you know blip that I had. So that's kind of where I encountered a lot of vulnerability in recent weeks, but I'm really trying to get into a space of like security and like reestablishing myself in my daily routine again. But then I have this
Yeah.
thought like until the next time something happens to bring me
Mm.
down, there's always this thought in the back of my mind. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. So this blip, you mean your breakup, like your experience with your ex? Is that the blip you're talking about?
No, I mean the blip of like the last few weeks with
Okay.
just feeling really out of commission, and but the blip with my last relationship and moving to another country and coming back and that falling apart, like I've had a good 2-3 year blip of the most chaotic vulnerability, intense, like pain and growth that I've ever experienced in my life. So
Totally.
that's all still in recent memory. Like I'm still collecting myself from all of that, for sure. For sure.
So what was the ceremony that you did? Or what was, sorry, I don't know if you said a ceremony, but what was
Yeah. Well, I kind of just came up with my own sort of thing. So, I mean, what I did was I just wanted to set up a space to I really like to call in like music that speaks to me. Like I mention it a lot on my when I share about it on social media, but like I will shuffle my music. My library, as everyone's, is kind of growing and changing all the time. So like it's not really that repetitive. And I'll just like shuffle my music and ask the universe to like bring me whatever songs I need to heal and move through, and to bring up whatever emotions I need. So, yeah, I have done this many times, but in this particular setup, it was more like, I set aside 20 minutes. I was in the dark. I was like, I want this to be like about closure. All the songs that sent my way and closure from my last relationship and like everything I've been through with that and before it. But
mm,
every song that came my way was like so relevant in ways that are hard to even describe, just like lyrically, melodically, bringing up memories, reminding me of certain things.
mm,
And then I had, it's pretty vulnerable for me to talk about, speaking of vulnerability, because it's like, I've carried a lot of like anger and bitterness towards what's happened to me in my past relationship, and in some of my past, and like forgiveness is like not easy.
mhm,
um and there's other people in my life that have like I've encountered in not as direct ways, like extended family, like just there's figures in my life who have caused a lot of pain, either directly to me or around me. And so part of this was just like trying to achieve as much peace as I possibly could
mm,
with these figures and let them go. And that doesn't mean directly forgiving them to their face, but on a soul level, maybe acknowledging that we we cross paths for a reason, you know, being grateful for the lessons I learned as a result. And the lessons from all the encounters were massive and brought me to places I never thought I could get to with myself. Um, so yeah, I held the image of the person in my mind. I drew, like I used this like drawing tool, but like
mm,
you could draw it yourself in a notebook or on paper to kind of like hold an image of the person that's easier to look at than a photograph.
mhm,
Um, you can kind of picture it in a more soul level way
mm,
versus like a straight photograph that might be too soon for that, too direct, bring up too many things.
mhm,
And just kind of tried to relay a message of like, thanks for the lesson, like may you go in peace kind of thing. I
mm,
wish you luck. But like it's yeah, and I had a lot of emotion around it. It was tough. And I usually process a lot through writing, but I wanted this to just be a really insulated thing. And it just felt like a thing between my soul, their souls, my contracts with them. Um, and one thing I did that's kind of cool, I think, is like I asked for a song from me to the person and from the person to me.
Oh, cool.
And I felt that those were like mind-blowingly accurate.
Mm.
And it's a pretty cool thing to try. Like maybe I'll write it out as a structure sometime for other people to
Mm.
do. Because I just kind of intuitively like thought of it, and it aligned with some of the healing work I've done in the past. But I'll say that like it's a vulnerable spot for me because healing from everything I've been through is like still a journey. Um, there's waves of things that come up on a regular basis. Like I'll reach a point of peace and resolution, and then I'll have anger come up again, and then I'll have sadness come up again. And, so I don't
Yeah,
know that it's like over and done. Healing is like trickier than that. But yeah.
totally. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that ceremony and approach. And it's so authentic to you, which
Mm,
is really cool. I love how you show up so vulnerably as well on social media and sharing your experiences that you're having. And one of our intentions with today's episode is like allowing your true self to come forward through your vulnerability. And I feel like you exemplify that so beautifully. And like
thanks.
anybody watching this or listening to this can tell that this isn't an easy story for you to tell, or that this has been a very challenging experience for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to like stand in that and share it even when you have a sty on your eye and like can't see and feel like shit, and then you're dealing with like anger and heartbreak and betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you're showing those parts of yourself to the world, and I think that's really beautiful and probably inspiring for others, definitely empowering for others as well. Probably empowering for you to be like, I don't hold shame over my human experiences. This is me. This
Right,
is my
right.
authentic, fucking broken down self in this moment. Just as much as you are your like beautifully like put together, styled, like self as well, right?
Yeah,
There's such a big spectrum in terms of who we truly are. But I love
exactly.
how you do that. I think it's
Thank you
amazing.
so much. I mean, I feel the same way about you, like, and your content and everything that you put out there and share. And yeah, I mean, it's just, like, I think that being more vulnerable on social media has definitely helped my healing and processing as well. And there's been times where I've thought, am I overdoing it? Am I not doing enough? And
Mm-hmm.
like I even carry some shame around this story and what's happened to me, because like I'm like, do I sound bitter? But then I'm like, I'm not angry enough. Like I can't even speak about it plainly. And like there's still a lot of like abstractness and vagueness to me retelling what's happened, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure like you can pick up on in this, and times where I've written or talked about it. Like it's almost like I'm almost like I want to just be like, yeah, like this happened, like fuck that, like screw this person, like, and I feel that within me a lot, but it's
Hmm.
it's tricky. Like I'll just I think that's what happens with vulnerability is like, it's hard because we put ourselves out there or share things that are really, that can be really difficult and raw. And so there's a lot of like second guessing and doubting. And like, there's been so many times where I've almost deleted like posts and stories because I've been like, I look insane.
In your
Which,
perspective, yeah.
yeah, and I don't like saying that either, because it's like, we're like, what is insane? You know what I mean? We're normal. Like we're human. This is what
Yeah,
being a human is all about, right?
totally.
Um and yeah, and that, so I want to throw back at you that like your work with with authenticity has been really inspiring to me also, and you show up in such like honest ways emotionally where like
Mm.
you really like you embody the things that you're going through and you show your emotions. And um I mean, you've encouraged me many times to speak without fear of like repercussions or like what someone might think or how I might come across, you know, so you've done a lot to inspire me in that realm also.
Thank you for saying that. Mm. um, what was I going to say about? I actually love all of these examples that you're giving because I think that's what keeps people from being vulnerable are those stories of, am I going to look insane? I look
Mhm.
bad. Is this too much? Is this too little? Um, you were talking about that you're not necessarily able yet to talk about your experience in a way that you don't have emotions around it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because you're human and you're feeling it. And I may have talked about this in the series before, and I think I have, is I go the opposite way. And I've trained myself to like, again, like this has shifted in time, but my more natural way is to talk about things without emotion. This happened to
Mhm.
me. This person crushed my fucking heart. But like, people will be like, really? They crushed your heart? Because you seem fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like not allowing myself to be vulnerable and expressing the heartbreak. So the fact that you even have access to it and are
Mm.
showing it, that's vulnerability. And there's no right or wrong way to do vulnerability, but like um showing the emotion is so beautiful. And I speak to so many women who are afraid of crying and being seen in their tears or being angry.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's beautiful. Like, celebrate that. When you feel your emotions and you show your emotions, you're moving them through your body, you're healing, you're expressing yourself, you're holding space for your own truth.
Mhm.
Like it's amazing. It's a gift, it's a celebration. It's not something to hide from, and of course, or be ashamed of. And if that's our conditioning and that's what we're taught, and we're literally like breaking down those barriers that were imposed on us and like taking off the shackles and saying, I'm just as worthy of love when I am messy and crying or raging, you know, or
Mhm.
whatever it is, and looking unattractive to whatever the standards are out there.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Exactly.
huge fucking work and
Yeah.
deserves a ton of acknowledgement.
Yeah, and there's a huge element of almost like wanting to control a narrative for ourselves. Like that's what I come into, and I think that's what I was like kind of getting at as well with even just like verbally expressing things. Um because like say you went through like a breakup or a really difficult situation, when you're addressing it publicly in any which way, it's almost like I want to constantly seem in power about it, like in my
Mm-hmm.
power.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm not in my power and I'm crying about it, or I seem hurt about it, or I seem more peaceful or forgiving about it, it's like, to me, deep, and this is like just what I struggle with deep down, that I know not to validate or give into, because it's just the natural, like you've told me a lot about like vulnerability hangover.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just that feeling of like discomfort when we have stepped out and done something vulnerable. So that voice in me that's like, oh, like your voice around this isn't consistent, your expression around this isn't consistent, you seem weak right now. Or,
Mm.
oh, so you've completely forgiven like what this person's done, like it's all good. And it's like, no, it's not. Like there's
Yeah.
there's just this thing, and again, like I said, it's like it's it's naturally messy and organic to go through a healing process where like one day you are a bit more at peace with the situation. A week later, you're pissed about it again.
Totally.
Maybe a year later, something comes up to remind you of it and you're like totally torn apart again. So I think it has been helpful to share and feel into like all those different, energies around the same like narrative or experience. And yeah,
Mm,
even aesthetically, there is a temptation to look put together all the time, you know?
mm-hmm.
And I know that for a fact, like a few years ago, I used to never post myself if I wasn't put together. If I wasn't put together, you wouldn't hear from me for a few days to a week to months. I mean, when I was going through the thick of everything, I was barely posting to my social media for a good year and a half, and I
Yeah.
sort of came back. And it felt impossible for me to communicate and express externally then. I'm still not totally sure why. And it's something I'm still feeling into and reflecting on. But it was just, I was so lost and confused and anxious all the time that it's like I didn't have the confidence or ability to be myself.
Yeah, and I think that's normal and understandable when you're going through something really intense that you don't want to be seen in it or it doesn't feel safe. And I think there's also an honoring in that of sometimes like we're not sitting here being like post all your posts on social media need to be you crying or like you need to show up in certain ways. Like no, like it does vulnerability doesn't necessarily involve social media. Like it's like vulnerability in your life.
Right.
But it is important to honor your process and your pain and give yourself the space that you need to take care of yourself when you are going through hard things. I have that happening all the time where I'm just like I am like shattered or I am frozen. Like if I go into really major fear, it's like all of a sudden like I don't even know what to do. Like I'm just like dumbfounded. I'm like the animal that's like stares into the headlights like right before they're about to get hit by a car. It's like freeze
Mm,
mode. I'm like then I can't do anything. Like I just like either need to go to sleep or just like lie down and like watch a show because I'm just not capable. There's things that you
right.
can do when you're in that, which is have a
Yeah,
conversation with someone. You can try movement, all of that to help move the energy. But I think it's okay to retract
for sure.
when you're
Yeah.
in a vulnerable state. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I needed that to survive that period.
Yeah.
And I guess in ways like because of my relationship to my social media, I tend to see it like as an extension of
Mm,
myself or what I'm going through, which I don't know if that's like healthy always, because we do need breaks from it and we need to remind ourselves that, it's a lot of the offline stuff that matters more.
totally.
But there is a lot of meaning to the social media for me that's, that I weigh all the time and sort of struggle with. But
Mm,
like it's it is a bit of a reflection of what I'm going through because like I said, if I'm more silent and I tend to be more silent with people in my life if I'm going through a lot. Like during that period where I wasn't really communicating on social media, I wasn't communicating the same way to friends or family either. Like I was
right.
at risk of losing some of my closest, longest friendships because I guess like just to be a little more clear, like I was in a really manipulative like relationship for the better part of a year, like living in a different country for that person and very isolated. Um, and like was cheated on and all these things happened that I later found out but suspected the entire time. And I was anxious, like horribly anxious every day. So,
Yeah.
oof, gets emotional just talking about it. But yeah,
Mm.
like every day was about soothing my anxiety first, not connecting.
Yeah. And that's like amazing because I think if you were then stepping outwards with your anxiety, like it would not feel safe, and probably some like unsafe things would happen because
Oh,
you're
for
not
sure.
grounded and all of
Yeah.
that.
I'd be
Yeah.
like, even just like, I'd be like, oh, I'm freaking out about, I don't know, messing something up with the border and being sent back to Canada. And like when at the time that, I was
Yes.
wanting to stay and be in that relationship. So if I shared anything like that with anybody and they started to give me advice, I would have a full on panic attack because I'd be like, oh my God, like I should be doing this differently or that differently, or and people kind of like relate to you and bring up stories, which when you're in a healthy normal state of mind is like okay. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd have well-meaning people bring up a story about like how one of their friends like took years to get like into the country or like got banned for a few, but I was just like I can't
Yeah.
listen to that right now.
Yeah.
um so I wouldn't even tell people that I was in another country. Like a lot of people more distant from me, like acquaintances and stuff, like didn't even know that I had gone through a divorce, that I moved to the US. Like, um, it was just this dark period, like
Mm.
where I was in the dark, people around me were in the dark. And I mean, I think it was like the dark night of my soul. Yeah.
It was definitely your tower moment
Oh
of
my God. Yeah. Big time. Everything, my whole entire life completely shifted. And I was told in a reading, like I had a lot of card readings leading up to that moment with tower cards constantly showing up, so I was like terrified of them. But
yeah.
the card was just like, you can't prevent this, it's coming. But it'll
Wow.
be for your own good. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing you have to hold on to, and that's what I held on to the whole time. But I thought that my tower moment was my life uh self-destructing here, but kind of at my own whim. Like my life just didn't work for me anymore. I wasn't happy anymore. So I thought I was building a whole new life in another country, and that was going to be like my thing. But like that fell apart. Like that destroyed itself and a lot of the beliefs and ideas I had, like to an equal degree. Like I was just like, how much can one person take?
Yeah.
We can take a lot, but
Yeah.
it kind of like leveled me and brought on this opportunity for me to like literally rebirth and come back in a way that is truer to myself than I've ever been in my whole life. Like
Mm-hmm.
my whole life. And I had because I mentioned like I had these readings beforehand that also told me that I had built a life around me that didn't represent who I truly was, and I was
Mm.
going to have to rebuild it according to who I like truly am, right?
Wow.
So I was kind of trying, like I was like, is this it, with like this whole new setup of variables? And it was like, no, honey, far
Mm.
from.
Wow.
Yeah.
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 Whew.
How about you? How like how I feel
I
like I'm like my vulnerability is taking up the conversation,
no,
but
it's beautiful. It's beautiful, truly. Something I was thinking about is because I've been doing a lot of dating, especially since my cleanse was done in November, my man cleanse that I did, no dating men or anyone. And I've been dating a lot, and it was like divorce happened, was dating after my divorce. That all looked one way. Then I took this cleanse, really connected deeply with myself, and now dating a new is very different. And I've been very self-aware in the process. So how you were kind of talking about feeling anxious every day, and like you on some level knowing something was going on, I realized that when I go on dates, sometimes I feel anxious and sometimes I don't. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling anxious? Like, it's just a date. Why are you so nervous? Just act cool, like trying to coach myself through it, like be present, da da da. And then what I've started to notice is like the ones that I feel anxious around are not my people, are not aligned with me.
Right.
Sometimes I don't notice it in the moment, but I noticed it afterwards, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. That was a sign. Like we're not aligned. It could also mean that they're just nervous and I'm picking up on their nervousness. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember there was like one guy that I went on a date with who, like, I literally like was so infatuated. Like I fell in love with him on our first date, and like we had a second date and it was done. Like, and then I was like literally did not sleep for days. Like it really messed me up. But I remember, like, I think I drank like some wine before he even picked me up because he was like so attractive. I knew it was going to be a physical relationship because he was like in a like an open marriage. Um, so our connection was very much physical. And I was like, oh, maybe it's nerves around this. And I remember going to the restaurant with him and I was like so anxious. Just I'm like, why, please? And
Can I ask you, like, if you're nervous on a date, are you able to eat? Like, does it affect your,
it totally affects my eating.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I usually don't have a massive appetite on my dates. Actually, I did go on a date this week and was like famished. I was like, we ended up both ordering different sandwiches, and I
Mhm.
ordered a burger and he ordered like a sandwich, and we like split it. And I was like, I kind of wanted him to like eat less of the fries because I was so hungry. But if I'm nervous, yeah, it's less common for me. And I have all
Mhm.
kinds of digestive things going on. So my hunger is inconsistent.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so either I was like, it's my own nervousness or I'm picking up on theirs. And I think it's just evidence of like the wisdom of our bodies.
Yes. Yep.
And we're so used to being like, it's me.
Yeah.
There's something wrong with me, right? Like I remember the space you were in then. You were like, what's wrong with me? Like, why
The
am I so
whole time.
concerned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, like, my appetite was constantly disrupted. Like,
For sure.
I I do get digestive issues when I'm anxious. Like my appetite will be some like, but it takes a lot of anxiety for me to not be able to eat. And it's like to the
Mm,
point where, like, that's why I'd be trying to nurture the anxiety every day, was so that I could finally put food in my body and not waste away. And like, and then seeing the effects on my body itself and the weight change was difficult too, because I just could see that I was dissolving, to be honest. And
mm,
it made me horribly uncomfortable, and it made me feel really out of control because I couldn't just force the food. Like I couldn't just, and I trigger warning for any like eating disordered eating and eating issues, because I know it's hard to hear, but I just, yeah, it was, that was one of the most stressful things for me. And like, I blamed myself for all of it. I was like, I'm so anxious. I must be so anxious about having gone through a divorce over the last year and leaving my country and my family and friends, being in a new city, being worried about immigration, like once things got more serious. Like I just assumed that all of my anxiety was about that. But like, if you really like think about it and take yourself out of the situation and look at it objectively, if you're with your person, you should be on cloud nine about
mm.
everything that's like about your new life. Like obviously immigration stuff would be stressful. There's stuff to deal with after a divorce. Like there's a lot of emotional stuff there, but the amount of anxiety I was having was not like, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
didn't really make sense. So it makes sense now because I was simply unsafe and with the wrong person, with somebody who was harming me in many ways. And so my body knew that. And like from the very first encounter, like I couldn't eat. Like I could never
Mm,
my eating was always affected, and I just thought I was like super nervous. I think
mm,
about it all the time because it's hard to decipher sometimes like our gut feeling from anxiety and nervousness. And
mhm.
like you said, maybe we're feeding off the other person, maybe we are just nervous, maybe we're having a trigger come up. But I kind of feel this too, that no matter what, if someone you're around is bringing up anxiety for you,
Mhm.
there's something off, right?
Mhm.
Would you agree? Like it's not
Yeah.
maybe it's not 100% of the time, but if it's enough that like you really don't feel well around them and even
Yeah.
afterwards, and but it's confusing because at the same time like you might really truly be in love with them or think you're in love with
Mhm.
them or you're infatuated.
Mm.
So it's like such a conflicting um thing. But I think that that pull is more, the love pull is more about like an addiction or like a pull for healing a wound, or
Yeah.
you're meant to come together for this like difficult explosive lesson.
Yeah.
And then I just like feel betrayed by my soul for that. Like why do we have to go through that? But that's what we come here for, I guess, you know?
Totally. Yeah. And I think so you kind of talk about like being like, well, now that I look back, feeling anxious, all that, or like all the anxiety that I felt is like such a clear sign. But in the moment, you thought it was from your divorce and like moving to a new
Mhm.
country. And like, yeah, because you're exploring uncharted territory and going into a new experience. So you don't necessarily have something to compare to know that this is something is off. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I don't know that I was that anxious when I was dating in my 20s. Can't really remember, so it's like, and because we want to control it and take our power back, we make it about ourselves. Um, but I feel like to answer your question, I feel like if when you are physically around that person and you are feeling anxious a lot of the time, and unhappy a lot of the time, then yeah, there's a sign there. I think there is something about the in between when they're not around that I'm still navigating in terms of like what your truth really is. And like I
Mhm.
recently, not the same guy I shared sandwiches with, but like I recently went on a date which ended up being like 9 hours with this like amazing guy. Like I met him and I just felt comfortable with him right away. We like laughed and talked and like physical connection was there and like I just genuinely enjoy his company and felt completely comfortable around him, like no nothing. But the second our date was done, all of my anxiety started coming up because I was like, oh shit, I actually like this guy. Oh my god, like is he going to ghost me? Does he like me back? Is he just like going to use me for sex? Like all of these things were coming up, and I'm still in the process of dating this person if we end up going on another date. So I'll let you know how that goes for our next episode. Remind me. Fuck, I'm curious too.
Yeah.
But I know that when I was with him, I felt comfortable. When I walked away is when the anxiety comes up. And sometimes it's that, again, that post experience, like post vulnerability hangover that we might have
Mhm.
that brings up
Mhm.
our wounding. For me, it's a lot of my childhood abandonment stuff. So, like, again, it's not so clear cut, but I think
Yeah.
it's reminding ourselves that, like, anything you do, anytime you do something that feels really vulnerable or putting yourself out there, there's going to be a come down process. My
Right.
teacher, John Winelet, calls it like you're just digesting the fish from dinner,
Mm,
like you're just digesting the experience,
right.
and don't get so caught up in the mental thoughts and experiences. Like, trust your body when you're in it. So
That's a helpful way of looking at it. Because when
yeah.
I think, because like I'll tell myself then I should feel completely at peace around the right person, but
Hmm.
there may be other factors at play. And like, even just like I'm certain that dating again after a long period of not dating is a weird feeling. And like it's kind of like being a fish out of water again, you know?
Totally.
So, and I think back to like my ex-husband who I had, you know, an incredible connection with and like a great love with for a really long time, you know, and we parted ways in a very amicable way, which I'm so grateful for. Um, and I think about like the beginning of our relationship and like I remember being really nervous around him too.
Hmm.
To the point where like there was like the funny stories about just like our first, you know, our first hangouts like in the college like dorm, and like I'd come with like my whole like backpack of like textbooks and things like ready to like, because we were gonna like study and hang out, and I would leave like late at night, like walk to the parking lot, get in my car, drive away, and he'd call me and be like, you left like everything here, like your whole backpack. And I'd be like, oh, like thinking I walked out like so like cool and charming, you know what I mean? But I just like forgot my shit everywhere because I was so nervous and like not thinking. And yeah, and like I'd psych myself up on the drive over to see him, but then like the moment we'd be face to face, I would just be like, hey. But like in the car on the way there, in my imagination, I like walk in and I'm just like this badass, like hot babe and like so confident and like slam them against the wall and like make a move. And like, you know, in reality, I would just be like, like super nervous. But so I think that there's like, obviously things I really like that sentiment of just like letting it digest. And something with the last relationship that I think is like a big factor or differentiating factor is that people around me noticed that I seemed off, or just like my
Hmm.
closest friends would be like, you're unhappy a lot, or like you're stressing about him a lot, or about what they're doing, or like how they're not calling or texting, or they're disappearing on you. And like it's like for all the good rewarding bits, there was like more, almost equal or more, like stress and anxiety that,
Yeah.
again, I was like, are these triggers about someone not, I don't know, showing me enough love and validation, or are they just actually not showing me enough love and validation? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. That's a big statement right there. Yeah. And there really is no formula. Like, I know I was saying like, oh, if you're around them and you feel anxious, like of course we're going to be nervous. I remember when I first like hung out with like a guy that I liked, like I was like so nervous, like freaking out, you know what I mean? As a
Mhm.
teenager even. And I think it's getting those reflections from your loved ones is huge. And John Wineland talks about this a lot too. It's like, don't trust your own thoughts when you're in the digestion process.
Mhm.
Allow others to reflect back to you what the
Right.
experience is, because they will give you more truth than you will to yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we would be like, I could be like, oh, they haven't texted me in a week because they're like, they're going through something. They're
Mm-hmm.
busy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like deeper into a relationship where like, that's not cool, you know?
Right.
And a friend would be like, the fuck? Like, what kind
Mm-hmm.
of excuse? Like, they'd come back with some excuse or explanation. And, you know, my close friends would just be like, I don't know, like that doesn't feel right. But like sometimes our friends are like afraid to call it out as well, right? Because
Totally.
we also want to believe that this person has the best intentions, and there's so much to it. But yeah, I think there's just, I mean, dating itself is such a vulnerable experience because we're sharing ourselves with somebody else, we're putting trust in somebody else, we're navigating emotions, triggers, lack of emotions, like having to reject people, be rejected. um it's like I have moments where I'm like, maybe it's easier for me to stay in this non-dating phase of my life forever.
Totally. Totally.
And just if somebody comes along, they'll come along, you know?
Yeah, I've definitely had those thoughts too of like, why am I even dating? This is like not fun. Like it has its fun moments, but it also brings up all my shit, and like that
Mhm.
part isn't fun. So I can relate to that. And I think even if you are in a relationship, vulnerability is comes up all the time too, depending
Right.
on like your conditioning and your training. And it's like, and then when you have, you know, this relationship on the line and you've put time in with it and energy, however long it is, then it's like, ooh, I don't know if that I want to speak my truth. I don't know that I want to show my emotions, because what if they reject me in the process, or the last time I did, they did XYZ, so now it's
Mhm.
unsafe. Um, but that vulnerability and showing that truth is the only way that you're going to be able to get your needs met,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's in dating, like, it's funny, yeah. So even with this guy specifically, I was like, okay, well, he hasn't texted me, so like I'm definitely not going to text him. And if he texts me, I'm going to wait like at least a few hours and maybe even a day to
Oh my God.
respond to
Yeah.
him, because I don't want to be too available. And then
Yep.
I get an email from I don't know if you follow Jordan Gray. He's kind of like a relationship coach. He's really awesome on Instagram, and I'm on his email list, and I get an email from him being like, how to like create authentic connections and like not attract unavailable partners. And I was like, well, this is interesting and timely, because I have a history of attracting unavailable men, which contributes to my fears when I do like someone.
Mhm.
And it was like, don't play games with texting and how
Yeah.
often you communicate with them. When you love them, tell them you love them.
Yeah.
Are you available?
Oh.
Right? And it's like, shit. You know, it like kind of hit home for me, and none of it was shocking. Like, I know these things, and it's like when you're in a triggered state, you're not using
Mhm.
all of your tools sometimes, because you're in like your ego and your wounded self and your inner child is running the show.
Exactly.
Um, but it was such a beautiful reminder of like, so many times in my life I have adjusted myself to make my partner happy,
Yes.
so many fucking times. And it's like, because it's like, well, I just don't want to lose love, I don't want to lose love.
Mhm.
And like, no, like, I'm going to communicate with you as often as I want and express to you how I feel. And if you don't want that, then you're not rejecting me, like you're just unavailable for
Yeah.
whatever reason, or we're not aligned, and that's okay. And it's like, ooh, like my inner child really doesn't like that,
Yeah.
because that's so vulnerable, and then it's their call in some way, and I could get rejected. But that's the only way I'm going to get my needs met. They're not going to get
Exactly.
met by me pretending I don't have them.
Totally. And like, we're just putting it off until it has to come up later anyway, either on
Totally.
their terms or in some unexpected way, because we eventually have to face the music. And we think we're like saving ourselves pain, but I think it's like we're so afraid of what might happen in that moment that we'd rather put it off as long as we like absolutely can. And I mean, I like one thing I definitely, because a lot of the stuff from my past relationship, you know, that was really hard, was just processing the things and like, you know, you worked with me a lot on this and like guided me through just like the things that I allowed, that I can take responsibility for. And, you know, and there's a whole component to that whole story and experience in my life was not having the self-worth and respect for myself to be like, no, I will not accept this kind of love or situation or whatever. And, you know, even if the truth and revelation wasn't in my face until the end, there were a lot of flags and a lot of little things that I saw and experienced and was afraid to address or pick at. Like, I mean, there's certainly things I did address, but like, man, like the games and stories, like I fully played into that. Like, I don't want to be a jealous girlfriend. I don't want to seem insecure. I'm chill. I'm cool. Do your thing. You don't want to write me for 4 days. I'm cool with that. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, even in the early stages, it's like, I want to know if we're exclusive or not. How long do we put off that question and conversation and just like suffer in the meantime of like, I think they're with somebody else right now. I should just go out on a date with somebody right now. Like blah, 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 blah. When the reality might be like, I want to be exclusive with this person right now. Let me put that out there and have this conversation and see if we're on the same page or not. Instead of spending months being like, you know, I'm just going to play it cool till they are the ones to come to me about it. Like it's wild.
No, totally.
There's so much like saving face, trying to play cool. And again, I think it's that whole idea of wanting to be in control of this narrative we have of ourselves that, like, again, like my narrative, you could say, was like, I'm just this really like, or want to be this really confident, chill, like,
yeah, totally
vibing person in a relationship who's cool with whatever.
Yeah.
And like,
totally.
that's
I
not
can
realistic.
so relate to that. Totally. Yeah. And like, so I remember with that guy that I was telling you, the guy that I was telling you about that I was in love with after like one date. So we ended up having like a beautiful like date together. We slept together. We had like amazing sex. Like I was like, whoa, mind blown. And then didn't hear from him for like days. And I remember having so much anxiety in me going through that experience with him. And then I was like, listen, like, we got to get on a phone call. Like, I need to talk to you about what I'm feeling right now. And he's like, okay. And that was so vulnerable for me because I was basically I told him, I was like, this lack of communication is really hard for me. And I need to know that I'm going to be getting, like, these are the things that I need. And it's fine. I don't need to hang out with you all the time. Like, I have like my own life. And like, this was Paul, the open relationship guy. And like, so he had already laid on the table, like, this is what I can offer in advance in terms of how frequently we see each other. And I was cool with that. And I basically said to him, I'm like, I feel like I would feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more at peace if I knew that after the first time we hung out, we already had a next date planned and scheduled. Oh wait, I know we're gonna hang out. You're not like abandoning me, whatever. And he was like, oh yeah, cool. Like I could totally do that. And I was like, okay, like let's plan our next date now. Next date happened. Did we plan the one after that? No. Like, and he just like so he was like, even with the communication things, he said he would step up in some ways, he didn't. But I was like, fuck, well, at least I told him what my needs are. And he basically said to me, I can't do that for you.
Exactly.
And that was really hard for me at that time because I think probably similar to you a little bit coming out of your divorce, like I had that fantasy of like, I knew him and I wouldn't have a future together, but like that I'd be swept off my feet and in love and romance and everything would be like wonderful. but it wasn't, and he wasn't delivering on it, and that really broke my heart in some ways. Again, like
Mm-hmm.
still, you know, whether I was in love or not, likely not in love. I didn't know him. It was like infatuation stage still, but it felt like love.
Mm-hmm.
um and it's like having some of those conversations, which might feel really early. Like you're going to tell the person that you're hanging out with that like you already want to plan your next date with them in order for you to feel secure. Like, fuck yeah. Like if that's what you need,
Exactly. Yeah.
then tell them that. And if they're like, sorry, I still have to feel into whether like I like you that much, then like you get to decide like,
Yeah.
okay, then maybe I don't want to pursue this, or maybe they're not as into me. And like, am I willing to put myself on the line or
Yeah.
whatever
And it's
around it?
helpful to communicate it because they might communicate something back or an alternative that suits you that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of. And it just like creates
Totally.
a space for collaboration and more of a two-way street. And, you know, it's like how much pain would that have saved you, or did that save you down the road of instead just constantly hoping or anticipating another date and waiting like, okay, it's been 2 weeks, it's been 3 weeks, and then like a date comes and then you're like, again,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, it's been a week, it's been 2 weeks. At least having communicated it at the outset, it's a need that it was quickly revealed whether this person was going to match up to it or not, you know.
Oh my
um
gosh. And Sue's like, for me, it went on for like weeks. Weeks. I
yeah.
went on vacation. I like came back. Like we still hadn't like, oh no, I think we had plans at that point, but it was still, it was ridiculous. Like it was like I was just like this little like puppy dog, like, come play with me, come play with me. And it's fine. Like I know that doesn't sound overly compassionate to myself, but I
Mhm.
personally think it's beautiful that we are loving, trusting humans that like open our hearts to people. And
Mhm.
sadly, we can get hurt in the process, but like I wouldn't choose any other way to live, because having a guarded heart and being on the defense and having your walls up, you're never going to get what you want. You
Yeah.
never will, until the circumstances are perfect. Like, when will the circumstances be perfect? So,
Yeah. And you might think you're like a cool badass. Like I might think I'm a cool badass chick for not caring if someone doesn't text me the next morning.
yeah.
But the reality probably is that if I like the person, either way, I think to me, and I this isn't practiced fully, so like I don't know if this is like an exact need of mine,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure after I spend a night with somebody, I like appreciate a text the next morning that they had a good time or what the next step is, or if there is one.
Yeah.
Like if it was like a week that went by without anything, even if I was just like, okay, done, parting ways, like that would still not sit
Yeah.
right with me. And it's okay to be somebody who wants that kind of, you know, acknowledgement or closure or communication the next day, and to judge somebody's merit on that and whether they're
Mm,
going to fit in with your life on that.
right. Right.
Like catch it early on, if anything. You know, if someone's a
Totally.
poor communicator and they're ghosting every few days or weeks, or like stop answering your texts like the way they used to, and you know, start to show inconsistencies like that, it's like move on.
Totally.
You'll find somebody who communicates the way that you want to. And um
Yeah.
because like I tried to get past those flags. And if a person is you know, if they have the intention to keep you there in like a manipulative way, on the surface they will meet your needs and make you think that, like, and this messes with my head, but like it's like they'll do that bare minimum that you're asking
Mm,
for. um but it's like because they were already showing signs early on of not being that person, those efforts are like shallow and transparent, and you'll eventually see that. And
mm-hmm.
they'll eventually falter and it'll fall, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically hopeless.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like it's I feel like it's so much more complex. Like I just think about the work that I've been doing like with John Wineland and his amazing team. And I've been learning so much about like the masculine and the feminine and how the masculine will like compartmentalize and like be like I'm when they're working, like they're working. When
Mhm,
they're cooking, they're cooking. Like they're not multitasking. You know, the TV
mhm,
might be on in the background, but like I'm sure every single woman can vouch for like sitting and like talking to a man who's doing something and him having zero response. Like he doesn't even
mhm.
hear you because he's so focused. We don't do that as women. We multitask, like it's just a part of our nature. So we're always aware of everything that's going on. So I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking of like an experience that someone in this someone that I know that has had who is very experienced in this work whose partners was getting massively triggered by the whole experience and was going through his own trauma and would disappear and wouldn't show up
Mhm.
and yet she would still be like, well, I'm here, I know this is right, and I know this is true, and I know what your truth is. And now they have this like beautiful, incredible relationship.
Right, right.
So like
Ah,
I'm like I think it's really being true with yourself and what your needs are.
yeah.
And again, we're not relationship experts, we're just
Mhm.
humans that have gone through our own experiences and so forth. But
And I think you're right. There's no true and tried formula for every person and
yeah,
situation. Like you just have to feel it out because I agree with you.
yes,
Like I disappear sometimes, like I said, when I'm going
right,
through a hard or anxious time, like I might not be as responsive to people and sometimes I drop the ball. I'm sure that can happen romantically. So yeah, it's hard to say and I probably still have like wounds to heal around it because I
mm-hmm.
thought that the disappearing act was more about like self soothing when it was probably more about like
Mm,
abandonment and focus elsewhere, right?
yeah.
Um, and that's not going to be the case for everybody. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I'm just thinking of another actually example now of like a friend of mine who's in a beautiful relationship and her like partner is like a shitty texter.
right.
And like when he's traveling, like he won't really text her. And she's like, what the heck? So she expressed her needs to him and they're like agreed, like, okay, I'll text you before I go to sleep. So she like, you know, and everything else is wonderful. He's just not a great texter and
Yeah.
he's in the moment of whatever he's experiencing. So like
Yeah, I think it's like expressing your needs and how you're feeling because that's part of being vulnerable is like you're showing up with your true like emotion and even the shame of admitting that something might be triggering or difficult for you or like these are what your needs are
yeah.
and the person might meet them or they might not and they might struggle to meet them and it might be a bit of a rocky road or they might initially meet them and then fall off like it's that
Yeah.
story is gonna unravel the way that it's supposed to or happen the way that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing is that you save yourself the suffering of trying to act cool, play games, hide your true nature, and you put it out there. But it's tough. I still, even as I say it, I'm still like, but I really want to be like cool.
I know, me too. Me too. Same. Completely. Um, yeah. So much to unfold. I kind of love that like relationships came into this and breakups a little bit because that was the other topic that we had put out there.
Yeah. Yeah. We
What
did
would
them both
we
service.
kind of both did the most service, yeah, which I
Yeah.
love. What so when it comes to vulnerability, whether it's in a relationship or on your social media or just how you're showing up in your life, what is a path of self-exploration that you would encourage in the listeners and viewers to explore?
I would like Yeah, like that's right. Like whether it is on social media or I guess I would say in whatever avenues are around you.
Hmm.
So like friends, family, a loved one, social media, if you express yourself there. I would take a couple days, I'd say maybe like 3 days, just it's not too overwhelming. And like just try to live those days more authentically, even if it's like
Mm.
hard to and is embarrassing and sucks. So it's like if it comes to social media and you're like usually posting stories, but you think you look really bad that day or you don't feel good, like post something anyway and just
Mm.
see what happens. If you are upset with somebody and you wouldn't typically communicate it, like try like basically just like try to live as a more vulnerable person and try to identify some small ways that you can step into more vulnerability and then give yourself the time to self-soothe, like use those 3 days as this like container to be more vulnerable and also be extra loving with yourself because
Mm.
like we've
Mm.
touched on, the vulnerability hangover is real and
Yeah.
you just want to make yourself feel as safe and loved as possible through that exploration.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah. And I think what I would offer is say something to someone in your life that you've always wanted to say it to, but haven't. And I'm not saying like go and bash someone. Like I'm saying from like a loving, vulnerable place of either saying, when you did this, it hurt me. It could even be some if your girlfriend doesn't respond to your text.
Mhm.
Hey, that felt shitty when you didn't respond to my message. Or maybe you've always wanted to tell your mother-in-law that you actually like don't like chicken, you
Oh my God,
know?
these things are giving me so much. Like, I feel all of those. I
Right?
applaud anyone for doing these things, especially the mother in law chats.
Right. Or tell your like attractive like neighbor that you find them attractive. And maybe they're in a relationship and that's cool. It can just be like, "Hey, I've just always noticed this and I just want to acknowledge this about you, but you are very attractive and I'm saying this without wanting anything from you, but I
Mhm.
feel like it's really nice to hear a compliment and I just wanted to acknowledge your looks. Like have a nice day." You know?
Wow.
Like something and it doesn't again,
I love all of those
I love all of
examples.
them
Oh
too.
my God.
And I'm going to do this as well and report back. So,
Maybe I
yeah,
should too.
do it. Do it.
Oh my God. Like a day. Yeah. Ooh,
It doesn't have to be
I
a
love
full
the
day. It can
examples.
be
No, just an act.
one
Yeah.
thing with one person. And you probably already have someone who's like popped into your mind. You know what I mean? Like as we listen to this, it's like, oh, yeah, there's that. So yeah, so thank you for this episode, for listening, for watching, Suzanna, for being here, and all of your light and honesty and vulnerability. Yeah, I'm so
Thank
grateful
you.
for you and all of your shares.
Same.
And next time, last episode, we'll see what it's going to be.
Crazy. Wow.
Bye.
Bye.